What a special moment it is to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Bank Street College, a very, very special place. Thank you to Shale and the leadership, faculty, and board of Bank Street for this invitation to be here with you today, and to all of the students and teachers who represent what Bank Street is all about. A beacon in this world for deep attention to children and their learning, and commitment to a more caring and just society through that mission. When Lucy Sprague Mitchell founded the Bureau of Educational Experiments in 1916, she saw in the Bureau an opportunity to provide the cornerstone of a more democratic and just society through the education of young people. The BEE, as it was called, set out to study children, to find out what kind of environment is best suited to their learning and growth, to create that environment, and then to prepare adults to maintain it. The Bureau became Bank Street as a result of a series of meetings between Mitchell and the leaders of a network of progressive schools that approached her with the idea of creating a cooperative teacher preparation program anchored in child development, social justice, and the social context of children and schooling. Mitchell's vision was that the school would be a laboratory that would be staffed by teachers, psychologists, and researchers whose collaborative work would create and study environments in which children grew and learned to their full potential, to educate teachers and others how to create these environments, and that work still guides and animates the Bank Street approach to the preparation of teaching. The work was grounded in a vision of learning that is currently being reprised. Now we're calling it 21st century learning, deeper learning, all kinds of other names, but it is not so new. That learning was seen not as a matter of acquiring information, the empty receptacle theory of mind, but as a process of coming to understand the world one lives in, acquiring the range of capabilities that enables one to be an effective, productive member of society. These capabilities encompass the practical level of everyday problem solving, the ability to conceptualize, to reason in ways that are grounded, rigorous, and creative. And we've heard some wonderful examples of that this afternoon. Students in Bank Street schools are researchers and scientists and mathematicians and writers and artists. When you go into a Bank Street classroom, you will see them building with blocks, painting, drawing, writing stories, reading stories and poems, working with manipulatives at the math table, exploring scientific principles and mathematical quantities at the sand table or the water table, working with clay, observing and recording and recounting all manner of things as scientists do. They'll be at the literacy center, the math table, the breakfast corner, both learning, playing, investigating as they develop those cognitive abilities. And what are the teachers doing? They, in turn, are observing and thinking and planning and structuring the opportunities for students to develop competence and thinking and independence. When we recently conducted from my center at Stanford a study of Bank Street College, we talked to a lot of current students and graduates, and one of them at Brooklyn New School explained that work this way. She said, "Most of my work at Bank Street had to do with really looking at children as a whole. We focused on gaining a deeper understanding of how children develop and how to meet individual needs. This kind of work was about zooming into the different developmental areas, the social and emotional, the cognitive and language component, the physical development. A lot of emphasis was placed on self-regulation and helping children figure out what self-regulating strategies work for them. We learned to look at the whole child by making informal and formal observations, writing descriptive reviews, and case studies of students." Many people think of things like child development and social concern as that soft and mushy stuff. But that is not the Bank Street way. The Bank Street Way, as Lucy Sprague Mitchell noted, was to turn out teachers whose attitude toward their work and life is scientific, to be eager, alert, and observant in developing new strategies that work for their children. That approach to acting based on growing knowledge has had a large effect on systems as well as classrooms. Bank Street was the first institution of higher education to work in active partnership with the public schools of New York City. Bank Street worked collaboratively with the federal government to support the design of the National Head Start program. Bank Street served as a prime sponsor and designer of Project Follow Through, which provided support services for kindergarten and early elementary school children, and as many of you know, enabled the positive effects of Head Start to continue into the early school years. Bank Street published the first multiracial, urban-oriented readers for young children, the Bank Street Readers, and more recently developed the Bank Street Ready to Read series. In collaboration with the Newark Public Schools, Bank Street developed Project New Beginnings to help restructure early childhood education in the Newark Public Schools. More recently, Bank Street partnered with the New York City Department of Education to launch Getting Ready for Pre-K, a professional development initiative designed to advance best practices in pre-kindergarten teaching and learning. I mention some of those things because we have a tendency to think about societal programs and policies as completely distinct from classroom work. And yet Bank Street is a place that connects social change with the deep, focused understanding of children and their learning. I realized when I moved to New York City many years ago, and I was in and out of schools, that I could recognize a Bank Street graduate by what was going on in the classroom. Typically, you will see all kinds of things on the walls, student work of all kinds hanging from the ceilings, sometimes in mobiles and other kinds of artifacts. Children industriously working, seemingly on their own, magically, in various centers and places. And if you look closely, you might see the teacher, off in a corner, perhaps kneeling down and working with a few children, perhaps documenting what they're doing on a bunch of sticky notes or a clipboard, but every child intensely engaged in a deep form of learning that I personally had not experienced either as a student myself or as a teacher when I taught high school in another city. When there were many negative views of teacher education being propounded, and by the way, that hasn't stopped in case you hadn't noticed. I asked principals where did they get their best teachers because I wanted to study powerful teacher education, and I heard from them about Bank Street graduates. In that study, I had the privilege to begin to understand the Bank Street Way. And more recently, I've been privileged to study Bank Street once again, more than a decade later, to look at surveys of employers and graduates, to interview employers and current students and graduates, to look at estimates of the contributions to student learning that Bank Street teachers make. And I could tell you a lot about our findings statistically, Bank Street by the numbers, and qualitatively. But suffice it to say that what we found in this study is that Bank Street graduates, in comparison to a random sample of teachers across New York State and the employers who employ them, find Bank Street teachers extremely well prepared relative to other teachers and better prepared in virtually every area to relate classroom learning to the real world, to develop curriculum based on how children learn, to teach children from diverse racial, ethnic, linguistic, and economic backgrounds, to help students think critically and solve problems, to engage students in cooperative work, to develop healthy classrooms that develop social and emotional learning as well as academic learning, to work with parents and families. Teachers feel much better prepared and twice as likely to feel prepared to work with English learners and diverse students. And then we heard from Literally, I could give you hundreds of quotes, but I'll only give you a couple from graduates and employers about what that means for education. As one graduate put it, Bank Street College of Education was by far the best thing I ever did for myself as both a learner and a teacher. It made me the teacher I am today. The courses and instructors were unparalleled in their knowledge and understanding of child development and curriculum development. Another said, Bank Street College changed the way I live and how I see the world. The program not only taught me how to teach children academics, but how to help them become meaningful members of society. My time at Bank Street made me a deeply reflective person who now understands how to meet children where they are, how to foster a caring and safe community, how to build a rigorous and creative curriculum. And employers said things like, I find Bank Street students to be insightful and reflective, open to and actively engaged in continued learning. They are dedicated professionals who take their commitment to education and young children seriously. One employer, who was also a Bank Street grad, said, I look for certain hallmarks and shared experiences with the teachers we hire. I am struck by the diversity of the graduates, but their amazingly similar experiences at the college. Bank Street is a hallmark for early childhood education. Educators learn how to get the best from children while nurturing their curiosity and growth. And when you see places where Bank Street teachers are gathered in numbers, in schools like Community Roots, like Midtown West, like Brooklyn New School, and others, you see truly magical work going on in the public schools. As Allie said earlier, Community Roots actually grew out of a course at Bank Street, and one of the teachers associated with that school explained, I stand up for my students when I don't agree because of the social justice I learned from Bank Street. My rich learning experiences in teacher development, diversity, perspectives from varied peoples, literature students and teachers has allowed me to build parents' trust and support. I still refer to the text professors and other alumni to grow and learn as a teacher. We interviewed Allie and her colleague, Sarah Stone, and they explained how they started the school, which you've heard about, part of which was creating a school that could counter the trend in urban school reform to create schools that have a no excuses ideology that prioritizes discipline and regimentation, walking in a line, not talking, sitting straight but not thinking, not expressing. And as Allie put it, our goal was to create a setting where teachers care for and love their kids, that feels familial, where families are welcomed in the classroom, where children are learning to be researchers. That's how we're going to teach children through engaging project-based social studies work. There was not a great belief, we thought, at least in New York, that that type of education is for everyone. And one of the things we saw at Community Roots was not just this extraordinary work of teachers and students together, but a community open work program where in an after-school setting, there were 25 workshops being offered by parents and community members of all kinds, woodworking and sports and reading and a variety of things where all across the school, the community had come in, skateboarding, embroidery, cooking, yoga, origami, to bring the community to the school just as the school goes out to the community. Our national challenge at this moment is, who is this learning for? There is a view in the land that a new moment for education is coming. The quantity of human knowledge is exploding. Now, as a Stanford professor, I don't like to quote people from Berkeley. However, there are a couple of UC Berkeley researchers who've been plotting the growth of knowledge in the world, And they found that between 1999 and 2003, there was more new knowledge created in the world than in the entire history of the world preceding. Think about that for just a moment. Technology knowledge is doubling every 11 months. Our world is being transformed by these new technologies, as well as shifting demographics, the demands of a global economy. An estimated 2/3 of young people will ultimately work in careers that don't exist today. And as our children need to be prepared for all of these complex realities, that requires what many would consider new approaches to learning. Although at their core, they are 100-year-old practices developed at Bank Street. But unlike in past eras, there's no set body of knowledge that we could divide into 12 years of schooling and carefully give to children to memorize and spit back that will prepare them to meet their futures. The mission for schools can no longer be to cover the curriculum or get through the book. It must be to prepare students to work at jobs that do not yet exist, creating ideas and solutions for products and problems that have not yet been identified, using technologies that have not yet been invented. Rather than memorizing material from static textbooks, our young people need to learn how to become analysts and investigators who can work with knowledge they themselves assemble to solve complex problems we have not yet managed to solve. That is, in fact, the Bank Street way. The problem is our current education system was designed to meet the needs of the Industrial Revolution and not the knowledge revolution. And our education policies are too often designed to hold the old factory model in place, rather than to stimulate this new learning and to create the settings in which it can thrive. It is critical that we acknowledge and address this new moment if we are going to survive and succeed as a people in this fast-paced, knowledge-based world that requires this kind of learning. And the new learning must be supported by a transformed system of education that provides empowering learning opportunities for all children, that develop their abilities to find and apply knowledge and think creatively and critically, solve problems, communicate, collaborate, contribute to the improvement of community and society. That system has to be designed and managed and funded to support deeper learning for each and every child. That system has to assess learning authentically with tools that are used to inform teaching and support progress, rather than to punish staff, students, or schools. That system has to guarantee a diverse and highly competent educator workforce with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to help all children succeed. And that system must continually improve through research, evaluation, sharing of best practices, and ongoing inquiry within and across every level of the system. We have to make headway on the equity agenda that will level the playing field for all of our children. Today, the U.S. system provides the most unequal educational inputs and outcomes in the industrialized world, with more children living in poverty, without homes and food security, and more segregated communities with more unequal school funding than any of our peer nations. Inequality is the single most fundamental reason for our country's lackluster performance on measures like the Program in International Student Assessment. Our focus on lower-level skills rather than higher-level abilities evaluated by PISA is the other reason. That our recent policies have not sufficiently changed the nature of learning and the extent of inequality is demonstrated by the fact that U.S. scores on PISA declined in every subject area between 2000 and 2012, with large gaps among children's performance persisting, even while we were intensely pursuing test-based accountability. It is time to get serious about how to support and enable our education system to respond to the massive changes in learning that are needed for every child. I have recently worked with colleagues to create a new organization called the Learning Policy Institute, an education think tank that will conduct and communicate research to shape policies that can provide equitable and empowering learning of this kind. And in fact, this was Lucy Sprague Mitchell's quest. The work of Bank Street and places like it will be central to this effort. Those who are working in the classroom and developing schools and thinking about how to develop the programs and the systems that we need to make those opportunities universal. It has become clear to so many of us that fighting the old divisive battles over last century's educational models will not prepare our children for the new world that they face. In the Bank Street College way, we must create a new conversation grounded in evidence about what works and focused on the learning our nation needs and our children deserve. Bank Street's mission, which, as you know, sees in it the improvement of education as a means to build a better society, must become the mission of all of us. This new moment for Bank Street must inspire one for our city and our nation. In that moment, the right to learn can become a reality for all of our children, and that is, of course, what matters most. Thank you.